from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. If you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I signed off last night saying I think a dozen people had been arrested by the NYPD with respect to the action that they took at Columbia University last night. And boy, did that number grow to about 300. I think there are about 300 people that were locked up as a result of the NYPD clearing the house, cleaning house, I should say, and clearing out everybody that was on the ground at Columbia University. And man, it's wild to think that this is where we are. Right, that this is how things are progressing, but this is exactly where we are. And earlier today, I'd seen a clip of audio that I thought, wow, that's just so interesting. That you have these students that are getting together and taking over buildings at Columbia University and other colleges across the country. And then you start looking and you realize most of these people aren't students. Most of these people are like my age. Why does that matter? Well, because, it's okay to be a student and be my age, but the majority of students are not in their 40s. And it's because so many of these people are not actual students. These are professional protesters. They're there for the cause. They've done this before, whether it's groups like Antifa, groups like the Black Lives Matter group and their craziness that they brought to the table during the George Floyd riots, or any other time that we've seen these crazy developments. There are groups of people that are here just for that. They're here for the crazy. They're here for the smoke. They're not here for times of peace or normalcy. And one of the clips of audio that I saw yesterday and I sent over, and maybe I'll play it again later, but I want to give a little bit of it to you now, is a woman named Joanna King Stutzky, an instructor at Columbia University. And she's grilled by reporters after demanding that the university help feed the protesters that were occupying Hamilton Hall, which is the building they took over. And she then goes on to make the case that people better not get in the way of them getting the food and water that they needed. But no one had ever tried to get in the way. Listen to this.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building, now would you please bring us food and water? And
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food.
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it
but
violently.
They haven't stopped it yet.
I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
She doesn't know to what extent they have stopped the delivery of food and water, but just in case, they're making sure that they get a commitment from them that they will not stop it. I mean, it's laughable and insane at the same time to sit here and think that you could really have a legitimate conversation with a group like this, or at least with this individual. I mean, I just was, again, I was floored by this back and forth. Not saying it's happening, but we want to make sure. And again, I don't know if this is somebody being a wise guy, that they're trying to make a point and they're like, well, I'm going to double down here. Or do they not realize that this is exactly how it has to be, right? You can't say, hey, stop doing that when nobody's doing that to begin with. I don't know. It's quite crazy to me. Anyway, there's a new law that has been proposed by Senator Marsha Blackburn for the protection of minors that may have been exploited or trafficked. And we're going to get to the bottom of that straight ahead. Don't go anywhere, folks. I am Rich Valdez. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You saw it last night because New York was under siege last night, and these people, they were intense, and the person that heads up Columbia University was a great school. It's been, badly damaged, I think, reputationally. But the person that heads it up, a woman, she waited so long. She was so weak. She was so afraid. She was so bad. They could have done this with the tents, and it would have gone quickly and no problem. But they did an incredible job. They went into one of the big buildings, a beautiful landmark building. Boy, they got the hell beat out of it last night. You're supposed to take care of those buildings. It took a beating. But the police came in, and in exactly 2 hours, everything was over. It was a beautiful thing to watch. New York's finest.
There you have former President Trump, and welcome back, amigos. I want to get reaction to that clip, as well as the developments that we see in New York City, as well as something that I think we all need to know about called the Report Act, and a bunch of other things that we're going to squeeze into this segment from none other than United States Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, welcome.
I'm delighted to join you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. So you hear this audio clip of President Trump talking about 300 people being arrested as they cleared out the siege that took place at Columbia University late last night. And some of your colleagues from the House have been very critical about this. Where do you stand on it?
We should not only arrest them, we should keep them in jail because of the crimes that they have committed. And think about it like this. You have individuals, some who are here on student visas. We should pull those visas. We should deport them. You have students who are getting federal student loans. Those are underpinned by taxpayer dollars. So they should lose those loans. And if someone is standing out there saying, I am Hamas, we are Hamas, we should add their name to the terrorist watch list. Rich, I believe if somebody tells you they are a terrorist, you should believe them and add them to the terrorist watch list, put them on the no-fly list. Let's make certain that they're not going to be able to travel around the country.
Sounds fair to me, Senator. Now, there's a couple of things that I think go along with that. There's a lot of people that are affected by this. We're seeing not just these college campuses, being run amok, but overall the fact that we now have a growing sentiment for Hamas, right, which is causing major problems for one of our I'm going to say our key ally in the Middle East region. What are your thoughts on the developments towards a ceasefire that seem to be promising, but I'm not holding my breath? What do you think?
I think that what we should do is allow Israel to take the steps that are necessary for them to defend themselves. And we know that if we want to help the Gazans and the Palestinian people, the best thing we can do is get rid of Hamas, because Hamas is a terrorist organization. It has kept the Palestinian people impoverished. When you have aid or UN support going into Gaza, who scoops that up? It is Hamas. They use it for themselves. They use it for their fighters. This aid is not meeting the needs of the Palestinian people. That is why in the Senate we agreed in a bipartisan manner to defund UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency that is there in Palestine, because we found out people who were affiliated with Hamas were working with UNRWA. They were employed by UNRWA. Hamas fighters were employed by them. Hamas had put their headquarters in the tunnel underneath the UNRWA headquarters. They were pulling their utilities off of that headquarters. So we need to be smart about this. Let Israel do the job of eliminating Hamas.
Yeah, I'm going to say amen to that, because that whole UNRWA thing, what a scandal that was. Now, Senator, you've passed a bill, right? You proposed this bill. It was passed just the night before last, scheduled to be signed by President Biden. It's called the Report Act. Tell us about it.
Yes, the Report Act is another step in helping to protect our nation's children and those that are being trafficked. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they have worked with us on this as we were looking at the issue of child exploitation and pornography that is online, pedophiles and predators online that are meeting children. We realized there needed to be some updates in the law. So I have worked on a bipartisan basis on that. And what we have done is to allow a longer period of time to hold that damaging information so that we can get these pedophiles and predators into court. We can prosecute them and put them in prison where they belong. The bill also requires social media platforms, when they know that they have someone who is using exploitative material of children, sexually exploitative material, or pornographic material, then the entity is going to have to report that to NCMEC or to the local law enforcement so we can capture that information and then prosecute these individuals. Also, the legislation will allow for NCMEC and law enforcement to transfer this information via the cloud to prosecutors and judges, so that these trials can be done in a timely manner. Right now, they're having to put it on the thumb drive, or they're having to print it all out, transfer it manually. What we want to do is get these people into court, convict them, and lock them up.
Now, I think this is something that most Americans, I'm going to venture to say, I think most Americans would think that this is already happening, this type of coordination. And I'm honestly a little surprised that it's not. But it doesn't surprise me because we started with big tech companies. And I know that there was an internal audit by Meta, mainly I think for Instagram, about a year and a half ago, where they found so many irregularities in this area of child exploitation. and they tried to fix it themselves rather than, bring in any external partners or alerting authorities. And I found that to be somewhat alarming. So I'm grateful for this bill. What was your impetus for putting this bill together?
I've done quite a bit of work on how we protect our children in the virtual space. And I've co-authored the Kids Online Safety Act with Senator Blumenthal. There again, completely bipartisan, as is the Report Act. And this is, as we look at the vulnerabilities for children and what is happening with children in this, we worked with NCMEC and with law enforcement. They said, many times the period of time that we're allowed to hold this damaging pornographic information, it will expire before the court has time to pull the individual forward for a trial. So what we've done is to extend that time period so that we can get them into court and so that we can move them to a trial and conviction.
Outstanding work. Folks, we're on with United States Senator Marsha Blackburn. And Senator, in the couple of minutes that we have left, tell us about the probe that the Senate is doing into Grubhub and other similar app platforms.
Yes, some of my colleagues and I realize that what is happening with these illegal aliens that are coming in the country, the cartels, of course, bring them in, and the cartels have to have these individuals go to work and pay the cartel back for their fee to cross the border. Nobody crosses the border without paying the cartel. And one of the things the cartels have started to do is to get people who have accounts on DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats and say, hey, let us use your account. We'll put somebody out here running the account, picking up the food, delivering the food, and we'll split the money with you. And so they've been doing this. And people will have someone come to their door. It's not the car. It is not the image of the person they're expecting, but they will be delivering their order from wherever. This is extremely dangerous for individuals to be opening their door to someone who is in the country illegally, someone that can be a criminal illegal alien, someone who has not been properly vetted. So we have written these companies. We are asking for further explanation because the American people need to know that when they request an order and a delivery is being made, that they know who it is that is actually making that delivery.
Outstanding work, Senator. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Let everybody know how they can follow you and keep up to speed with the great work that you're doing.
Yes, you'll find me on social media at Marsha Blackburn. Stay in touch.
Outstanding. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for staying up late with us.
You got it. Take care. All
right, folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. There is more to come straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Amigos, we continue our conversation tonight. And something I wanted to get into. I mentioned this a little bit briefly yesterday. We'd heard a clip of audio from Dr. Peter McCullough about the fallout of vaccines. He indicated that his final word on that was that children were better off, based on the study that he was looking at, without the vaccine than with the vaccine. And the next story I saw in that same vein, or at least in the vein of vaccines, was that AstraZeneca admitted in a lawsuit that there were some serious concerns about stroke and other, what's the word? It's a big word that includes thrombo something. And these basically these fatal blood clots that can be the result of the vaccine. And this is something that was widely suspected, early on in the pandemic, a lot of people questioning that, and it ends up being the case. So I wanted to get somebody who obviously understands this better than I to help us make sense of it all. And that someone is Congressman Andy Harris, a Republican from Maryland's 1st Congressional District, somebody I had the pleasure of meeting at CPAC in Hungary. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, Rich.
You bet. Thanks for joining us. And I wanted to get your take on this AstraZeneca news about this vaccine, about the, I guess, regarding these blood clots. There was initially, I think it was kind of shunned, and then it was kind of like, well, maybe, but we don't know. It's inconclusive. And now I think they've admitted this is something that is definitely happening. What's your reaction to that news?
Look, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, we've known really for quite a long time that there are these thrombosis episodes that occur that appeared temporarily related to people who had gotten the vaccine. In fact, one of the members of Congress, his wife had a stroke after the vaccine. It was probably thrombotic stroke. And now, it's revealed that there actually is a mechanism, thrombotic thrombocytopenia, it's called, that's related to the interactions of the virus particle itself, in this case, the spike protein, with various with one of the factors that involve clotting. So there's actually kind of a scientific reason to believe that this connection is likely true. And again, when you rush through development of a new drug or therapy so quickly, you're not going to pick up all the possible side effects. The real problem was the denial that those side effects existed at all. That's really what wasn't fair with the American public, or really with the entire world, is just to admit, look, there is likely some risk associated with the vaccine. We're not really certain what it is, but we were told at first that no, this is an incredibly safe vaccine, and again, we weren't informed like we usually are about a risk-benefit ratio because we weren't really sure of the risks, although I think they were belittled by a lot of the people who were promoting the vaccine.
Now, Congressman Andy Harris, when you hear from people that, you just mentioned one of your colleagues, their wife had a stroke, other people have had a stroke related to the mechanism you just mentioned and the interaction with the spike protein. Some people say, oh, my gosh, I want to sue the company. I want to do this. And they find out that they really can't because of certain laws that were passed way back when. And this is, I think, frustrating for some people and really surprising to others that the vaccine companies, or I should say the pharma companies, are able to kind of operate with this impunity. Now others say, well, no, it's not impunity. It's that they put their best foot forward to create a vaccine, and then they're kind of saying, hey, look, I'm indemnified. I don't want any issue if this doesn't go my way. And I'm just wondering, what's A, your opinion of that, and B, is there an alternate route that might be better where it's a little bit more fair to the people who may be harmed by a vaccine?
Well, in the United States, I mean, you're right. What we've done is, we have isolated the vaccine companies from liability to a large extent, but we are supposed to have, a national fund that would pay for vaccine side effects. And again, the problem here is not that we do have a fund that will do that. The problem is that that the vaccine manufacturers, who were, again, isolated from liability up front, they should have just admitted that, yeah, there could be risks.
Right.
We've developed the vaccine. We think overall that's a good thing. But to belittle the chance of risk is what I've always thought was pretty suspect, even from the very beginning. Because when you're in medicine, you do things. You know that almost everything you do has a risk, and you have to be honest with people. And I think they just weren't honest with people.
Yeah, I agree with that. Folks, we're on with Representative Andy Harris. He's congressman from the 1st District of Maryland and a physician. And we're going to come right back. There's a couple of things I want to address with the congressman. One is this crazy news that I've heard that the Biden administration's looking to accept Palestinian refugees coming out of Gaza, potentially Hamas. And it's one thing to say you're going to help these people out because they're coming from a war-torn region. It's another thing to make sure in the same breath you say, and we're going to make sure they're not Hamas. We're already seeing what American Hamas looks like on college campuses, and I don't think we need more of that. So we're going to get your opinion on that, Congressman, as well as the changes in regulation on marijuana. I want you to weigh in on that as well. Folks, don't move a muscle. We're coming right back with Congressman Andy Harris.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
As the administration considers bringing Palestinians here to the U.S. as refugees, do you know how many people that the U.S. hopes to relocate? And secondly, given the challenges getting in and out of Gaza, will the U.S. assist in physically bringing Palestinians here?
So let me just first start saying that we just don't have anything to announce at this time.
Well, you know, Karine Jean-Pierre, I have some amazing sources. You wouldn't believe it, and I will never reveal my sources. All right, this one I'll reveal. It's CBS News. Listen to this.
White House is considering welcoming some Palestinians from Gaza into the United States as refugees. This is according to internal federal documents obtained by CBS News. The Palestinians under consideration would include individuals with immediate family who are either U.S. citizens or permanent residents. Last year, the U.S. moved 60,000 refugees from around the world, but only 56 of them were Palestinian.
So there you go. Karine Jean-Pierre may not have anything to say, but clearly the news media knows what's going on, usually a little bit more than she does. Our guest, Congressman Andy Harris, when you hear, A, that the White House has no comment on something that they've clearly commented on and that people know about, and B, what's your overall reaction to this story?
Well, you know, honestly, the United States just has to stop being the place where everybody in the world from everywhere goes and, you know, with what appears to be an unlimited immigration policy. You know, in this case, this is a refugee program, and the thing are that, you know, there are people who wait in line for years to come into the United States legally, to gain a pathway to citizenship. And here what we're doing is we're putting these people ahead of everyone else in line. And under this program, you're not just admitted into the United States, you're given a pathway to citizenship. And again, Gaza elected Hamas as their government. They chose Hamas as their government. I don't understand why we would give them preference over people coming from basically friendly nations in the world. It just makes no sense to me.
I'm with you on that one. And it's interesting to me that, again, interesting, I guess that's my initial reaction, but it doesn't really surprise me that this administration would make a move like this, given what's happening at our own border, that they wouldn't say, why not? It's already open. Come one, come all. But it's still, I guess, surprising and alarming that a place that is currently at war with an ally of ours that is aligned with a regime like Iran, and as we all know, in Tehran, they open up their sessions of parliament chanting death to Israel, death to America, calling us the great Satan and Israel the little Satan. It does seem to me like bad judgment and, dare I say, a really bad idea. Do you think this is something that the president's going to receive some major pushback on, or is it like many other things that he decides to do unilaterally, he's just going to do what he wants to do?
Well, I think he is going to do what he wants to do, but I think that's just going to be another, nail in his coffin come November. Is people are going to remember this? The bottom line is, how are you going to vet someone coming from Gaza? It's not like the Gaza government has cooperated with which is Hamas, has cooperated with the U.S. On vetting people. There is just going to be no way to know whether these people are Hamas or not, because it's not like you can call up, the capital of Gaza City, and say, hey, is this person legit or not? Because we don't have relationships with the Hamas government. We never have. Vetting these people will be impossible.
Yeah, I agree. And this is part of the larger problem overall. Now, what's your assessment of what's happening at the border? It seems like the Republicans have made a move finally to get this impeachment underway for Alejandro Mayorkas. Super. The Senate doesn't take any action on it, which I think is expected. I didn't think that they were going to do much in that regard. Is there more? And if so, what can be done to slow the chaos that's going on at the border?
Well, it's pretty clear that again, we're just going to have an election in November that elects a new president who actually will control the border. Until then, it is possible that Joe Biden, again, putting his finger in the wind, realizing that he's down in the polls badly, is going to continue to make completely political decisions. One of them is going to be that, well, gee, maybe I should close the border 3.5 years into my presidency. It's possible, but that won't fool people. They know it in their neighborhoods. They know it in how the economy is going. They know that they're not going to be fooled by any last-minute action, but it's possible Joe Biden takes some action to close the border. The only problem is it's 3.5 years too late.
Folks, we're on with Congressman Andy Harris from the 1st Congressional District in Maryland. Now, Congressman, I want to get your take on this medical marijuana, the change in regulations in marijuana, where it's they're thinking of relaxing some of these regulations. Tell us a little bit about it and your thoughts.
That's right. So what happened was the administration, again, I think in a purely political move, wants to change the what we call scheduling of marijuana, to take it out of the highest risk category and to move it to a lower risk category as a drug. And the most worrisome thing is that the Food and Drug Administration has completely changed the criteria it uses for what's called a scheduling change, from a scientific criteria to a set of criteria that basically you could use to approve anything. And it's just transparently, it created what created what is normally a scientific process, and it morphed that into a purely political process. Look, this president is behind in the polls with young people. I think he told the FDA, forget about the science about marijuana being a gateway addictive drug, and just come up with a justification for us relaxing the regulation of marijuana. And the FDA did just that.
Now, as a physician, I saw one of your tweets and the position you took, and it made sense to me. But why do you take the position you do when so many people out there are saying, "Oh, come on, it's a little bit of weed. What's the big deal?"
Well, because the government here is taking a position that they're doing this for medical reasons, for pharmaceutical reasons. Look, when you talk about marijuana, and this is why this is completely unscientific. What do you mean by marijuana? Do you mean the high THC marijuana, the low THC marijuana, the high CBD marijuana? I mean, marijuana is a collection of dozens of substances that could have pharmaceutical action. This is just not the way you deal with a drug in this country. And again, the FDA, in advising the DEA on the reclassification, went through what to anybody who understands what this process is supposed to be, they've completely politicized the process. And that's why people just don't respect the government health agencies anymore, because they obviously have just become political tools of the administrations.
Yep. Congressman Andy Harris, I want to thank you for the insight on that, because I think a lot of people realize that it's political, but not in the way that you just kind of explained it. Whereas I think people think it's more like people are bought and paid for by certain lobbies. Whereas here, I think you're 100% spot on. Where this is Biden making a play to people that would forget the lobbyists or the special interests. He's just trying to go after voters, which he's doing with pretty much everything he's doing, from getting refunds on airlines to student loans and the chicanery that he's pulling there. Every last move he's making is to try and secure himself a victory in November, which for me seems fleeting looking at recent polls. And in the 30 seconds that we have remaining, how do you think things look for President Biden this November?
Look, I think obviously if the election were held today, he'd lose. He'd probably lose in a near electoral landslide. But November's a long way off. With these recent what's going on college campuses, this could be a very long and difficult summer. Yeah, well said. Congressman Andy Harris, let everybody know how they could find you and keep up to speed with the work that you're doing. Sure. They can just go to harris.house.gov, harris.house.gov, and look at our website. Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you for staying up late with us. I appreciate it. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Rich. You bet. All right, folks. We're going to continue with your calls and more. Coming up straight ahead, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
And I know that there are those who are attempting to say, well, the majority of people may have been students. You don't have to be the majority to influence and co-op an operation. That is what this is about. And so if we want to play the word police, you could do so. I'm going to play the New York City police, where we're going to protect our city from those who are attempting to do what is happening globally. There is a movement to radicalize young people, and I'm not going to wait until it's done and all of a sudden acknowledge the existence of it. This is a global problem. Young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children, and I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York.
That is Mayor Eric Adams, who I like to call Elite Eric Adams. We've seen him on vacation in the Middle East and here and there and everywhere else, and I'm very critical of him most of the time. However, I'm going to say I think we're reaching the tipping point, right? And I say that because typically Eric Adams would dance around something like this, and he wouldn't call it out the way it is. Similarly, last week, we saw the Steamfitters Union president come out and say, we're Democrats. We're New York Democrats, right? And he came out, and he was very, very New York, authentic accent, and it was great to hear it. And he said, but we love this country. And that's true. These union guys have always been hardcore Democrats, but they hang an American flag off every crane for every building they're building in New York City. And to hear Eric Adams, who's a former cop, and which is why I'm usually at odds with him, because he's a former cop and he's so soft on crime. But he sounds serious to me, and it sounds like he's reached a point where he's saying, look, I'm a Democrat, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not about to let this stuff happen. And we don't have time for the second part of that clip. I'll play it for you a little bit later. But he goes on to say that this is America, this is New York City, you don't go flying some other flag, and he's talking about the Palestinian flag, that they took down the American flag to raise the Palestinian flag. You know, back in the days, that's what you did when you took over something as an act of war. I'm not saying this is an act of war, but glad to hear that Eric Adams is calling this out, saying the people on these college campuses in New York City are not students, they're professionals, and they're there to radicalize young people. Kudos to you, Mayor Adams. All right, folks, Rich Valdez, the music means we're coming right back with the second hour. You get to make a sandwich, but you got to come right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you. Hour number 2, Wednesday night edition of the program. And our phone number, if you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, you feel free to give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And the interesting thing that we left off on, right? We left off talking about New York City, and we're going to end up at New York City again, believe it or not, in our commentary now. But I wanted to go over a couple of headlines with you because it's interesting to me that there's so many things happening in this world of ours, and we only get to tackle a couple of things at a time here, right? And we're going to talk about a number of those things. But it doesn't cease to amaze me how many headlines we get thrown at us, and I just think, my goodness, this is I see all these headlines and I can barely keep up with them. Just imagine people who are this isn't their job, right? They don't work in a think tank, they don't work in the media, they don't work in radio or whatever. It's got to be a lot. But the Federal Reserve has decided to hold interest rates steady. And I don't know if this is a good move or a bad move. I guess for many, they're thinking, all right, well, at least it's not going up again. The caveat to that is if it doesn't go up again, does that mean we have to do this for a longer period of time? So we'll dig into that a little bit later. But that's the big news today from Chairman Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve. We also see that Biden, who has been secretly flying people that want to be in this country, he calls asylum seekers, and we may call illegal aliens. He's been flying them to different places, and now he's using his illegitimate parole plan to fly them into Florida. So I guess they're trying to soften some of the red areas, the red states, while trying to strengthen some of the blue states in their latest approach to what they're doing with the folks that are coming through the border. Then we've got Trump back to the campaign trail, finally, because there was no trial today, and we'll get some audio from Trump on stuff like that, on everything that, he's made comments on everything under the sun lately. And let's see, you've got immigration polling has become so bad for Biden. One Democrat is calling for a return to Trump-era policies. That's funny, and I hope it happens. And, of course, we talked about the White House accepting Palestinian refugees. And again, I understand accepting refugees from war-torn countries. What I don't understand is how you would announce a plan like this and, A, seemingly not know about it when the White House gets questioned. They have no idea. We heard that a little while ago. And B, without saying, look, we're going to make sure we're not allowing in people that are enemies of this nation. And I didn't hear any such mention of that. And last I checked, there are folks from Hamas that are aligned with folks in Israel, with folks in Tehran, in Iran, that hate America. They hate Israel. They say death to Israel and death to America. And that sounds pretty concerning to me, right? I'd want to make sure those people are not the people that we want inside our country. The CDC has now found evidence that COVID-19 vaccines caused injury, including death. We talked about that with Congressman Andy Harris, and my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, good old AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all out crazy herself. She's at it again, and this time she's talking about the subsidies on oil and gas. Give this a listen.
Oil and gas already enjoy an obscene wealth of tax giveaways in this country, special loopholes, and other subsidies as well. But we're supposed to believe that if we continue to let them drill just a little more, that they will finally lower their prices. This is all trickle-down nonsense. This bill is a giveaway to some of the wealthiest and most damaging polluters in the United States.
That, of course, again, is AOC All Out Crazy, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. And I want to give you a different perspective than what she's just laid out, and that is the perspective of my good friend James Agresti, president and co-founder of Just Facts. Check them out at justfacts.com. Jim Agresti, welcome back, sir.
Richie V, great to be back with you.
What's going on with AOC?
Well, as usual, what she's saying is simply not true. It's not that I have a different perspective than her. It's that what she's saying is false. So when she says there's an obscene wealth of tax giveaways for oil and gas, that is categorically false, and I'll tell you why. The subsidies that are present for oil and gas are typically designed to give small and domestic producers a slight edge over foreign and larger producers. But the industry as a whole pays for these subsidies through fees. So the last time the federal government tallied all of the subsidies that go to oil and gas, you know what they found? It actually penalizes them at a rate of about 1/4 cent per gallon. Not a lot of money, but the point is all the subsidies are evened out by, for lack of a better word, reverse subsidies. Then you also have the fact that oil and gas are directly targeted to be penalized by excise taxes, which are essentially a sin tax on certain behaviors that the government wants people to do less of. So there's excise taxes on every gallon of gas that's sold in this country at the federal and the state level, and then an enormous amount of regulations that have been piling up for decades. So, no, the oil and gas industry is not subsidized. It doesn't get tax giveaways. It's actually punished.
Now, how does she get away with this, Jim Agresti?
Well, we all know how she gets away with it. She's got a complicit media that is either ignorant and or dishonest and lets her get away with this stuff. And instead of correcting her, like the so-called fact-checkers claim to do, oftentimes they're amplifying the nonsense that these people spew.
Do you see a way out of this? Because to me, it seems like as long as we have a dishonest media and nobody's really going to call her out, if that's the media's job, then she gets to say whatever she wants and people believe her because she's Rep AOC.
Well, that's why we got guys like you, Richie V. I mean, you're out here speaking the truth, and, the best, what's the word, disinfectant for falsehoods is more free speech, more truth. You're out there shining light and disinfecting this. And I think also, in some ways, they slit their own throats, and I mean that figuratively, just in case someone's going to try to say Jim called for violence. I didn't. But when you say things that get to be so ridiculous, sooner or later, a certain portion of your audience starts to say, all right, I don't trust this person anymore. We saw that recently with the NPR editor who was saying, hey, I've been at this place for decades. I'm a liberal, but I just can't take this anymore. It's become too much. I can't swallow it.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're right. And in the same vein, I want to say that's exactly why we have organizations like justfacts.com, right, where you actually get to the facts using primary source data, where you're not putting spin on it. You're usually oftentimes kind of setting the record straight, letting people know exactly what the facts are, which is why I always love our conversations. Folks, we're on with Jim Agresti, president of Just Facts. And Jim, when we look at this situation, it's not, in my opinion, unique. I think there's a lot of situations where the left within the media, the left within our government will make a statement and, in effect, literally lie and not just lie. That oversimplifies it. They use projection, right? So whatever it is that they're saying that I'm doing is what they're actually doing. And I think that's the part that really gets me, is that they try to totally flip scenarios around. Like in this situation where AOC is saying, this is another scheme for rich people and it's to benefit the rich, when we realize that this is actually costing money. How does Joe Q. Public, your average working Joe that maybe he's working on a construction site, maybe he's a school teacher, maybe he's a cop, or whatever. Somebody's just getting by in life. Me, that I think people think just because I get to talk on the radio that no, I think I'm a regular person too. And there's so many people there that are just trying to make a living, trying to make a life, and they're bombarded with this misinformation and disinformation that the left puts out. And I just find it remarkable that it's happening. But what's your take on, do we ever get to the bottom of it? Do we ever get to a place where truth abounds? Or is it going to be a battle for the truth for the rest of our days?
I think it's going to be a battle for the truth. I think Ronald Reagan said something to the effect of every generation must fight for freedom and earn it. I think this has been going on since the history of mankind, truth versus lies, good versus evil. And so we're always going to have to fight for it. That's my honest take on the topic. And in terms of kind of inoculating people to the nonsense that have other things to do, they have families, they have jobs that aren't involved in public policy like you and I, so they don't have the time to vet all this. I think the best inoculation to that is to just stay agnostic. Whatever you hear, say, it might be true, it might not be true, but when you come onto something that's really important, take the time to truly research it out. Don't depend on Google. Listen to various voices, get the facts, and then make a decision on the things that are important. Everything else, just have a healthy skepticism and say, hey, maybe so, maybe not. I'm not going to come to a conclusion until I take the time to truly find out.
I think that's great advice. And I'll add to that by saying, listen to this show and make sure you subscribe to Jim's newsletter at justfacts.com, because he also has these great daily Just Facts tidbits at justfactsdaily.com. And I think everybody should be signed up for those. Folks, we're coming right back with James Agresti, president and co-founder of Just Facts. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
This is my favorite. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you before I say it that it enraged me. There is a definite anti-white feeling in the country right now.
Oh, please.
Yeah, that's what he said. Sir.
No, sir?
Yeah, sir. Nobody in your family was hung. Nobody in your family was chased because of the color of their skin. How dare you? There's no anti-white issue here. You are perpetrating anti-humanist issues here. So the question is he the future?
Is he the future? That's Whoopi Goldberg on The View yesterday, questioning whether Donald Trump, Donaldus Magnus, El Trumpito, is he the future? Now, I'm not saying that Trump is the future, might be the future president, but Whoopi Goldberg goes a step beyond where I think she needs to go with this stuff here. But that's where she lands. And oftentimes, many in the media do just that. Now, she's saying there's no anti-white sentiment. I think we've seen that. There's an anti-Jewish sentiment. There's definitely an anti-white sentiment that's cloaked in the guise of DEI, and we see that all over the place. So I would refute what she's saying and just say I think she's misunderstood, she's wrong, or she's lying, one or the other. But to me, the bigger issue here is the media. Who's running this media? Who's influencing this media? Where is this power coming from of reaching the masses? And there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot of merging and movement going on in the media landscape in our country that's interesting, including here on radio. with George Soros making plays for radio stations all over the country. So nothing is safe anymore, right? Nothing is safe. The left has figured out how to take control of things. But before I get too ahead of myself, I want to present that clip of audio of Whoopi Goldberg saying that Trump is wrong and he's bad, and that him saying that there's an anti-white sentiment in the country is wrong, and that he's promoting an anti-humanist issue for Americans. And I want to get a reaction to that from our guest, James Agresti, president and co-founder of Just Facts. Check them out at justfacts.com. Jim Agresti, when you hear Whoopi Goldberg say that there is no anti-white sentiment, I'm not white, right? I don't feel any anti-white sentiment in my life. But I can say I see it. I see it on social media, and I've seen it in so many of these policies. What are your thoughts?
Well, I see it too, just with the selection of certain terms that are used and thrown around very cavalierly in this day and age that would never be tolerated for any other race. For instance, white rage, whiteness. When they come up with these terms, what they're doing is they're turning the color of somebody's skin into a sin. Hey, some people have rage, some people are privileged, but to link that to their skin color, I just don't see how that's not racist or anti-white.
Right, especially if you turn around and you say this guy's got Puerto Rican rage or black rage, then it's like, how dare you, right? How dare you say something like that? So
or a negative connotation like Puerto Ricanness. You know, imagine that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, people would definitely take it the wrong way. And yet you're supposed to take it however they want you to take it when they say your whiteness or your white privilege. And so I agree with that. But I think it's the media that allows them to get away with this stuff. And I want you to give us some of your insight and what you've researched at Just Facts when it comes to who's pulling the strings in the corporate media.
Sure. So, you know, the so-called free press, as Biden calls them, is largely owned by billionaires and major corporations who systematically misinform the citizenry in ways that advance leftist narratives. I mean, there's some very obvious ones, like the owner of the Washington Post. That would be none other than billionaire Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Billionaire Salesforce founder Mark Beinhoff bought Time. Laurene Powell Jobs, the widow of Steve Jobs, she bought The Atlantic. The New York Times is something that's really interesting. You know, they talk about big money in politics. Did you know that the annual budget of the New York Times is larger than all Republican donations combined?
Wow.
I'm talking about congressional races, presidential races, dark money, soft money. That one media outlet basically has more power to communicate free speech than the combined donations of every Republican donor in this nation.
That amazes me, Jim Agresti. It really does, because I had no idea. You would think that it wouldn't be the case, but it is the case. Jim, I could do this with you all night, but the music means they're asking us both to go. Let everybody know how to find you, Jim.
JustFacts.com. Come check us out. Sign up for our emails. Richie V, always an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Folks, we're coming right back. I thank you, Jim Agresti. I am Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere. More to come.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Can you confidently say, I mean, with the American people watching, that the world is safer now 3 years under President Biden and your leadership?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Secretary, I have a list here. Where would you say that we're safer? Would you say we're safer in Afghanistan? Would you say we're safer in the Middle East? Would you say we're safer in Africa, the Red Sea, Israel, Europe, South China Sea, the homeland with FBI director talking about 300 people on the terrorist watch list that's come over our southern border? Where would you say we're safer?
Well, we certainly have worked hard to move things to
Mr. Secretary, I know we've worked hard to move things. Where, I mean, it should be a simple answer. You said, yes, you could confidently say we are safer after 3 years of your and the president's leadership.
Take a look.
Where are we safer?
Take a look at Europe, for example. What if we were not doing what we're doing in support of Ukraine? Where would Europe be right now?
Mr. Secretary, Europe has the largest land war on your watch, on the president's watch. Deterrence failed.
This is an interesting exchange that occurred yesterday between the Secretary of Defense and Representative Mike Waltz in a House committee hearing. And I got to tell you, I agree 100% here. You tell me what part of America is safer right now and under Biden and Lloyd Austin's watch, and, I'll tip my hat to you. I just don't think we're safer in any area. And it's alarming, to say the least. But this is what it is. And this is not the first time the United States has been in a predicament like this one, although it is, right? I don't think we've ever been in a predicament where we were in this proxy war in Europe and in many ways in another proxy war in the Middle East, while having a southern border that's wide open. I think it's unique, right? I think it is unique, and we haven't been in this particular position before, but we have been in positions where it's been hairy, to say the least. And I want to explore that a little bit, because I think sometimes Hollywood will glorify what it's like to serve in conflict, to be a mercenary, that type of thing. But we don't always know. We don't always know what it's like. But somebody that has served and has written an account about it is Morgan Lerette, former Army intelligence captain and author of the new book, Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. And we're going to have a conversation that's going to give us insight into the private world of military contractors that conduct very high-level, high-threat missions back then during the Iraq War. And this is very interesting to me because there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not all glorious. It's not all pretty. I guess we're going to get the good, the bad, and the ugly. Morgan Lerette, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rich. I appreciate it. I will say that if you live at the White House, it's probably safer for you than it was 4 years ago.
We found it. We found the what's safer under Biden's watch. His house. That's probably true, and probably his house in Delaware where he keeps his stolen classified records and his Corvette. Let us
exactly.
Yeah, let's dig into this because I think this is a very unique kind of memoir and a very unique title, Guns, Girls, and Greed, and it's something you could apply to gangsters in South Central Los Angeles, gangbangers on the streets of New York, or mercenaries in Iraq. Tell us how you came up with this concept and why you decided to write the book.
Yeah, I got tired of hearing, what Blackwater was and wasn't from a bunch of people like politicians and journalists and even Eric Prince saying, the good and the bad of all of it. And I thought, somebody's got to write this book from a ground perspective. And since I was there for 18 months and, I got a computer, why not me? Sometimes you just got to look in the mirror and say, why the heck not me? So That's the intent of the book, is really put the reader in the perspective of what it felt like to be a private military contractor in Iraq, where the rules were fuzzy, the danger was real, and every day was just a new learning experience.
So walk us through the timeline. You served in the U.S. military. Did you go straight from your military service into being a mercenary? Was there a stop off in between? What did it look like?
There was a stop off in between. So I joined the Air National Guard in 1999 because, we weren't going to war anytime soon. I felt pretty confident at that. And then after September 11th, I was activated for a couple of years, and we ended up going over to Oman, and I went to Jordan, Kuwait, and then Iraq during the ground offensive in 2003. And then after that, it's like, well, what the heck do you do? So I was going to college, and one of my buddies got on with Blackwater, and he just gave my name, and they called me up and said, hey, you want to come work for us? And I thought, I absolutely don't. That sounds crazy. And then they said, for $550 a day, does that change your mind? And I said, it absolutely does. Let's do it. So, and then after that, I got finished up my college degree, and I went to active duty Army as an intel officer and got out as a captain in 2013.
All right. So quite an illustrious career. And tell us, Captain, the I guess the nuance and how it really differed from your military service as an intel officer and anything else you'd done in the military to your work as a private military contractor. I'm guessing there was a lot of nuance, a lot of difference.
Yeah, well, first off, the rules of engagement over there were extremely fuzzy. I mean, you're putting civilians, United States citizens, into an active combat zone where the rules of the UCMJ, the military justice system, didn't apply. The rules of Iraq, their new laws, didn't apply. So what actually applied to us? And I still think that that's a fuzzy area. I will say that the private military contractors are a lot more efficient, right? You show up at a certain time. It's big boy rules. You put on all your body armor and you go out and do your job. Whereas the military is extremely bogged down by bureaucracy. And I think, with Afghanistan and Iraq, you can kind of see where that led over the course of time. Now, are PMCs better than the military? I don't think they are in the long run, but I also think that the military right now is not running as a well-oiled machine to be able to win wars either.
Right. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Folks, we're on with Morgan Lerette, former Army intelligence captain, and he's the author of Guns, Girls, and Greed. It's his memoir of being a mercenary in Iraq. And I want to get one of your top stories, the craziest thing that happened while you were serving as a mercenary when we come back. So keep that in the back of your head. Folks, we're on with Morgan Lerette, and we're coming right back. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're on with Morgan Lerette, former Army intelligence captain and author of the book Guns, Girls, and Greed. Honestly, sounds like a book worth reading, and it's about his time as a mercenary in Iraq. Before the break, I said, think of one of your craziest stories, because I think the listeners really want to hear about, the just how crazy it is. And by crazy, you fill in the blank of what crazy looks like, whether it's bloody, gory, funny, silly, sad, either way. But what's the most memorable story that comes to mind when you're asked a question like that?
Well, the story that comes to mind is we were driving a convoy south from northern Iraq down to Kirkuk, and there was this car driving northbound, and it started swerving. You could see it kind of fishtailing, and then almost like out of a Hollywood script, this thing hits a curb and just starts rolling across the highway, the divide of the highway, and there's just stuff flying out of this car, and everything that you can think of, like everything slowed down. It was like a movie, and it landed right in front of us and then went down this embankment. And as we got out of the vehicle, I I popped out. I was driving the lead vehicle, and the stuff that was flying out were kids. It was these kids without seatbelts on, and we raced over there. We did a bunch of first aid. We tried to get the kids set up and putting bandages on these locals, and they're crying and they're screaming. And all I could think was all those people that have been telling me I'm desensitized for playing video games all these years, they're full of crap. Because when you start seeing people actually dying,
I bet,
especially kids, there is nothing in this world that could ever prepare you for something like that. So we ended up getting the kids to the hospital. I know one of them survived. One of the other ones was probably didn't. And if we were military members, they all would have stood us in a line and we all would have gotten medals, but we're just private military contractors. And I doubt that anybody even knows that this happened. Until I wrote it in the book.
Right. Yeah. And, it's interesting. I guess you are the unsung heroes in many ways. The only ones that got any credit for anything was the guys from 13 Hours, right? Because they became the heroes of the day in a situation like theirs. But oftentimes we don't know who's serving as a military contractor and what they're able to do or what they're not able to do. And, yeah, I think it is pretty shocking to be, on the road and to see a car start spiraling out of control and things flying out, and some of those things being children. That's got to be a surreal experience, one that really is jarring. Now, the topic, or the title, I should say, Guns, Girls, and Greed. How did you land on a title like that?
Yeah, so, those are all the topics of conversation, right? What gun are you using? What are your optics? What are you doing? Girls, anytime you have soldiers in a combat zone, 99% of the time it's just sheer boredom, 1% adrenaline. And what do you do with your downtime? Well, you talk about girls, you talk about your guns. And then, there've been a lot of Blackwater people that take umbrage with me saying greed and saying mercenary, but let's be honest here. We were over there because they were paying us $550 a day. We all could have raised our hand and said, oh, yeah, I want to go back as an E5, but we wanted the money. The adventure came with it and the other stuff. But at the end of the day, we weren't there, just out of largesse and because we wanted to help the people. And we wanted to get paid.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think most people do things to get paid. Folks, we're on with Morgan Lerette, former Army intelligence captain and author of the book Guns, Girls, and Greed. And when we look at your time in Iraq, we heard about your story. We heard about, the impetus for the book. Tell us about the overall part of your time there. What was the biggest takeaway for you being there?
I spent so much time in Iraq. I should have just bought a condo there. That way I had a nice bed, but over there, 04, 05, even 9 and 10, when I was back, the news was saying how we're winning and we're making all this progress, and politicians are saying this. And really, if you look at it from that ground perspective, like I was, I could tell that there was absolutely no way we were winning this. It just wasn't happening. You had the Sunnis and the Shias that had been fighting each other for thousands of years, and taking Saddam Hussein out of power caused the Shias to start taking retribution on the Sunnis. That's where you had your kill squads in 04, 05. And there was just so much anger and unrest. When I first got there, we were going through and driving people to election polling sites. And this little kid, we drive by him and he waves at us and he's got a big smile on his face, probably 7, 8 years old. And I would say within 6 months, so beginning of 2005, I was driving around. This little kid started pointing his fingers at us like it was a gun, acting like he was shooting at us. And that right there pretty much told me exactly where the country was headed at any given time. And we were not going to go and, impress upon them the desire for democracy that they haven't had or wanted for thousands of years.
Wow. So the innocence of this child was like, oh, wow, look at these guys. They're my friends. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, I don't care if I'm tiny. I'm taking you out.
Yeah, you could feel the population go from, hey, these guys liberated us, it's going to be better, to, hey, these guys aren't actually making our lives better, it's worse.
How did that happen? Was that just they looked around like we look around at Biden and we're like, damn, this sucks? Or was it because they were being pushed like a certain information campaign that made them believe this?
No, I mean, the electricity grid was down. They didn't have any kind of air conditioning. They had rolling blackouts. The government that was in place under Saddam was run by the Sunnis. And when we did the de-Baathification, we got rid of their military. We got rid of everybody that had ever run a government agency. And now we were putting in brand new people that had no idea what to do. So the government was no longer working for them. Now, under Saddam Hussein, the guy was a butthole. I'm not giving him any kind of praise, but at least he ran a tight ship. Under the new government, they couldn't even build schedules. They didn't know how to land planes. It was just an absolute melee. And it doesn't take long for people to sit back and say, you know what, this is worse than it was. Like, to your point, under Biden than it was under Trump.
Yeah, I get it. So really, disrupted their status quo to the point where they were like, we hate you. You ruined everything. Folks, I'm going to pick up on that when we come back. We're going to take a quick pause here with Morgan Lerette, former Army Intel captain and the author of the book, Guns, Girls, and Greed. And we'll pick up on that disruption when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Morgan Lerette, former Army Intel captain, author of the book Guns, Girls, and Greed. And we left off with your description of the disruption that occurred in Iraq. And I want you to take the next minute or two to really make the best presentation of the book to our audience so that they can pick up a copy or two of the book. Morgan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. If you like the movie Wolf of Wall Street, this is the book for you. It is a ground perspective, a view of the craziness that was in Iraq. The story that I told is just one of many that are absolutely insane. So you don't have to worry that, the commercials for the movie give away all the funny stuff. Absolutely didn't. So it really is something that pulls the veil off of what it is to be a Blackwater contractor. The same things that happen with soldiers, PTSD, living in a war zone, the stuff you kind of saw in Hurt Locker, where it just becomes normal and you want to keep going back. Even though you know that it is toxic, it is still intoxicating. And that's what I try to get across, is that don't feel bad for me. You're not going to get a whole lot of pontification of world events. But at the end of the day, these are still people that are putting themselves in harm's way, and all the same effects happen to them. So next time you think you know about Blackwater, if you hadn't read this book, I don't think you actually know what we did and how we did it and how absolutely hilarious and insane every day was.
Really well put. Now, Morgan, if people want to get a copy of the book, where is the best place for them to get 2 copies of the book, one for themselves and one to give away?
Well, yeah, you got to get 2. Amazon. Amazon is the place to be right now. So we have the hardcover. There's Kindle, and then the audiobook came out, and Jay Moore from Jerry Maguire actually read it, did a fantastic job. So you can consume this any way that you want.
Outstanding. Morgan Lerette, I want to thank you for your service to our country. I want to thank you for the book and for the conversation. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for staying up late with us.
Thanks, Rich. Take care.
You bet. God bless. All right, folks, Open Phone America. It's coming up right now. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this hour number 3 on Wednesday evening. The phone number, 833-4825-337-833. The number 4, my last name, Valdez, Valdes. And I want to invite you to call if you have something to say. We call this final hour of the program Open Phone America. This is where we have open phones across America, a time-honored tradition started by the late, great Larry King and continued by the late, great Jim Bohannon. And that's a tradition that I'm not going to break. So I'm honored to be a part of it with you all this evening and looking forward to speaking with people from all over the country. And we have such great callers that call in from Oregon and from California and from New York and Pittsburgh and the Carolinas and Florida and Chicago and where else? Indiana. I mean, there's so many places. I know I'm drawing a blank on a couple. Wisconsin. We're all over Wisconsin. Missouri. We have such great reach in this program as well. And I love speaking with Americans from all over the place. Vegas, right? We're out in Vegas. We're in Nevada. We're in Phoenix. And I'm looking forward to speaking with her, even Hawaii. I love chatting with our folks in Hawaii, the folks in Denver, Colorado, the folks in Alaska. I mean, it's just Texas. It's just so vast. And, you know, having traveled a little bit of this country, it's always amazing when you go to these places because you get to try the food. And one of the things I love about going different places is trying food. And I got to tell you, some of the most diverse recipes I've ever tasted have been right here in the United States. Like, for example, have barbecue. You can have barbecue all over the South, and it's always good. But you have barbecue in North Carolina. Very different. Very vinegar-based as opposed to every other state who does it differently. So that North Carolina barbecue, very, very different. And it's a very, very distinct taste. Very good, delicious, but very distinct. And it's one of the things I picked up along the way. And I said, man, that's really good. And I love trying new things. So anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. That's not a segue to a story. That was really just me thinking out loud because I'm a little rotund from time to time, and I think about food more often than I should. All right. Anyway, I gave you the number. You know what to do, 833-4-VALDEZ if you want to chime in. Now, I want to start off with a little bit of audio here. And one of the clips I want to start with is this gentleman named Robert Kagan. Don't know if he's related to Justice Kagan, but he's from the Washington Post, and he was on MSNBC yesterday, and he says that Trump has a very powerful constituency that is, get this, fundamentally seeking to overthrow the liberal system the founders created. Now, this sounds like the biggest crock of you-know-what that I've heard in a long time, but listen to this.
When he was asked, what does he think about, violating the Constitution, et cetera, and calling yourself dictator of a day, and he said the people like it. And I think that's a very important point that we are not focusing enough on. This isn't just about Donald Trump. He does have a very powerful, very mobilized constituency that is fundamentally seeking to overthrow the fundamental liberal system that the founders created. They oppose it. They oppose it because they think that their view of the nation, they have an ethno-religious definition of the nation. For them, the nation is a white Christian. For some of them, it's a white Protestant nation. This is an old strain in American history, after all. This didn't just pop up.
Now, Mr. Kagan, if you were here, I would posit to you that this has never changed, right? It has never changed. As a brown guy, I'm going to, dare I say, that this is still a white Christian nation. And for the most part, a white Protestant nation. I think he got that right. It's not that this is an ethno-religious definition of the nation. I would not define this nation as ethno-religious in any way. But if you asked me to describe it in an ethno-religious fashion, that is what I would say. Now, why would I say that? Maybe because, I don't know, I'm going out on a limb here. Maybe somebody in the studio could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would dare say that, I don't know, 65, 70% of the country are white and Protestant. That's what I'm going to say. I dare say it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was closer to 75% when I was a very young man in my 20s or even late teens. Does that mean it's not changing? Sure, it's changing. I particularly don't care that it changes. It is what it is. I don't feel like what matters when you see a change is not that people are not Protestant or not white. To me, that's not the issue. To me, the issue is, do we still uphold the red, white, and blue, right? If you've got social media, you were scrolling today and you saw the video of these frat boys on, I think it was UCLA campus, that decided, or Chapel Hill, excuse me, and that decided to, UNC Chapel Hill, they decided to hold the American flag, a large flag, that was brought down so that someone could raise the Palestinian flag. And in them raising the Palestinian flag, the American flag was about to hit the floor, and a bunch of, from what I could see, the majority white kids, young kids, 18, 19, 20 maybe, they were holding the flag up so it wouldn't hit the floor. And some people thought this was cool and patriotic, and they started to get video and take pictures, and it was all over social media today. And I thought that was really cool. It's, you know, it was something that I would hope my kids would do, even though they're two little brown girls by the left's standards, right? But I think it doesn't matter who you are. You stand for this flag, you kneel for God, and you have respect. And to me, it's that simple. It doesn't matter if you're black, if you're a Democrat, if you're white, if you're a Republican. None of that really matters. It's about certain values that we have as Americans. And for me, that's how I see it. Now, there might be some people that have a very chauvinistic view of what Americanism is, and it may, in fact, be whiteness and Christianity. And that's their problem and their view. I'm sure, you know, the David Dukes of the world do believe that. But I don't happen to be a part of that crew, right? And I still love this country. I still love our flag. I love what this country stands for. So my point is, you can embrace the tradition. You can uphold the values of an American and be respectful to the flag and the traditions and customs of this country without being, as Mr. Robert Kagan says, defining this country in an ethno-religious manner, just because the facts show that it likely is divided ethno-religiously that way. The problem here is there is anti-white sentiment in this country, contrary to what we heard earlier from Whoopi Goldberg. And there is definitely an anti-Christian bias in the country. That was made incredibly clear when we heard this woman on MSNBC one day, I forget her name now, when she said, you know, the fundamentalists that support Trump believe that their rights come from God and not the government. That is the very system, the liberal system, that Kagan is talking about in this clip. He says Trump has a powerful constituency that's fundamentally seeking to overthrow the liberal system the founders created. Yes, this liberal system, this system focused on liberty, is one where we are all allowed to pray to the God we choose, because the crown, King George, was imposing how people would worship in the colonies. Quick history lesson. I know you know this. And when they said you must pray at the Anglican Church, and people said, I don't want to do that. I want to be a Baptist, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. All of these things led to the revolution, as did the Boston Tea Party, no taxation without representation, right? So you tax people to death. You tell them that they can't pray the way they want to pray. Or in this case, you have the Robert Kagans of the world come and tell you that, you know, this is a white Christian nation, which last I checked, I think it is still a white Christian nation. I don't see that changing. I think it was white Christians that started the country. And maybe 50 years from now, it may be more mixed and more diverse, and that's fine. God bless. But it doesn't change what it is today. In my opinion, I think it's still a white Christian nation for the most part. And if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But I'm pretty sure we're above 51% white in America. And I think we're still, thank God, above 51% Christian, whether it's Catholic or Protestant. I think that's still the case. Now, I'm going to end right here, but I'm going to come back, and I want you to hear what Mayor Eric Adams had to say about flying the Palestinian flag on college campuses. Then we're going to get to your calls. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
And another significant part of the video was at the end. That's our flag, folks. Don't take over our buildings and put another flag up. That may be fine to other people, but it's not to me. My uncle died defending this country. And these men and women put their lives on the line. And it's despicable that schools will allow another country flag to fly in our country. So blame me for being proud to be an American. And I thank Commissioner Daughtry for putting that flag back up. We're not surrendering our way of life to anyone.
Who is this Eric Adams, and what have they done with the old mayor of New York City? Listen, I'm going to say I'll take it as I can get it, right? Even a broken clock is right twice a day. I hope that Eric Adams keeps this level of patriotism up, because as a New Yorker and as a former cop, I think I expect this from him, right? I really do. This is what a Democrat in New York looked like most of my life. Most of my life, Democrats in New York were ready to scrap and throw down if you were stepping on a flag, if a flag hit the floor, if you said something against our country. Like you saw earlier in the week, the construction workers that said to Biden to go F himself. This is how Democrats were in New York. They loved the country. They believed in good and right, and they didn't like evil and bad. And it was a good thing. Yet somehow things have morphed. So I'm really happy to hear this return to what I would say is normalcy. And I think it kind of snapped Eric Adams out of the leftist stupor that he was in. Now, maybe this is just politics. Maybe not. Maybe this is genuine. It sounds genuine to me. It seems sincere. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, just like those guys that were there with Trump the other day that said, he said, we're Democrats, right? The Steamfitters Union guys. He said, we're Democrats, but they've pushed us to the other side. And he's not lying. He's accurate, because that's what's happened, because of people like AOC, all out crazy, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. When she comes in and is leading the way with her district, looking like, you know, a third world country, or looking like the most dangerous areas of certain countries in South America. And not that I'm trying to put down South America. I'm just saying, you know, Queens is not supposed to look like an outdoor brothel. And it does. And she's doing nothing to combat that. But going back full circle here, and before the break, I was saying, dare I say, America's a white Christian nation. And I happen to be Christian, but I'm not white. Doesn't mean that we abandon our Americanism. Eric Adams is a black Democrat. And he's also talking about standing up for the flag and doing the right thing. The right thing is the right thing, irrespective of your race. So I said all this in response to this clip from Robert Kagan, who says that, you know, Trump's constituency is very powerful, very mobilized, and it's fundamentally seeking to overthrow the liberal system that the founders created. Sir, what are you thinking? He says they oppose it. They oppose it because they think that their view of the nation, they have an ethno-religious definition of the nation. No, You have an ethno-religious definition of the nation. I'm here going crazy trying to figure out the numbers. I've never thought about these numbers because I don't think of the nation through the lens of ethnicity and religion. I look at the whole world through my own ethnicity and religion, but I don't look at the country per se that way. But according to Pew Research, I'm getting this from our control room, 70% of the country identifies as Christian, 50% being Protestant, 20% being Catholic. Then I see numbers here. Back in 1990, 80% of Americans were white. That number has dwindled. I think 2019, the number's 65%. And I think as we stand today, the number's still around 65 or closer to 70% or something like that. I don't have a 76%. I have conflicting numbers in front of me. But my point is, that's where we are. That's where we stand. Now, I want to get to your calls because I've been ranting long enough. We've got calls from Maryland, Texas, Ohio, and from one of my favorite callers. Don't get jealous, everybody else, but Gil from Manila, Philippines. One of my favorite callers. Why? Because he is young enough to have listened to Larry King, young enough to have listened to Jim Bohannon, and young enough to have listened to me, the only 3 hosts of this program in the last 45 years. And I love chatting with our buddy Gil in Manila, Philippines. As always, sir, thanks for your service. How are you, Gil? Gil, going once. Gil, going twice. Can anybody hear me? Nobody answering. Okay, so we'll come back to Gil. Let us continue. Let's go to Corey. He's in Dallas, Texas, listening on KLIF. What say you, my man?
Hey, how's it going? Hey,
wonderful, thanks.
Can you? Hey,
all right, we're putting you on hold, Corey. Everybody can hear you, but I'm going to come back to you later. Next time, get straight to the point. Let's go to Isaac in Lorain, Ohio, WEOL. Go right ahead.
Oh, Rick, you always bragging about this is a white Christian nation.
No, I'm not. I've never bragged about this being a white Christian nation, but go right ahead.
I want to tell you one thing about Christianity is a blasphemous religion. It is not true. And like I say, what you got mixed up, you don't understand that the Old Testament is not Christianity. The New Testament is Christianity.
I do know
because
that.
It's a blasphemous
But I also know
creed.
that Christians follow a Jew, right? Christ was a Jew. So if you are a Christian, you follow Christ. And if Christ was a Jew, then by that virtue, you're a Jew. No, Isaac?
Jesus wasn't blasphemous either. The real Jesus, the white man Jesus is a blasphemous Jesus.
Why?
And you ought to quit it. Huh?
Why is it blasphemous for Jesus to be, and I'm not saying he's white, I agree, he's likely Middle Eastern.
He says he's the Son of God. That's blasphemous.
I think he said he was the Son of Man. You got to read your scriptures again.
Son of God. Yeah, don't change your mind.
I think we said he was the Son of God, which I believe is accurate. Anyway, Isaac, thank you for your call. I'm glad you're as happy as you are at this hour of the night. I'm glad you're listening to the show. I'm glad we could make your day. We're getting back to the rest of your calls straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Call screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Donald Trump still thinks windmills cause cancer. That's what he said. And by the way, remember when he was trying to deal with COVID, he said, just inject a little bleach in your veins. He missed it. All went to his hair.
Now, I got to tell you, That I actually thought that last joke was funny about the bleach in his veins, the bleach in his hair. That was good comedy, you know. I believe in good comedy. I'm not one of those that hates on Colbert and hates on the other ones. I might hate on their political stances, but I think Colbert is hysterical. I know some people, I can't stand the guy. Trevor Noah, another one, hysterical. These guys make me laugh because I think it's funny. I just do. Anyway, I believe we've reconnected with Gil from Manila, Philippines. Gil, go right ahead.
Yes, as a comment to Mr. Biden's last statement, I think that you can get this joke to him, that Joe Biden is proof positive that cheap hair plugs cause brain damage. So
That's good. Is that original? Did you write that one yourself? That's very funny.
That's my joke. You know, I don't steal material.
I know. I always tell the guys in the studio. Gil is always with the best punchlines. I appreciate it, Gil. How you been, man? Haven't heard from you in a while.
Well, since April Fool's Day, and I have one last quick thing. I have an April Fool that I pulled on Jim Bohannon.
Go for it.
A few years ago, while he was still on the air, my wife and I went shopping to Vietnam, and I brought him back a few souvenirs. One was a refrigerator magnet that said Saigon, because I'm sure he didn't get one of those the first time he was there. But anyhow, I said, I heard a rumor about you, your military time here in Vietnam. And he said, oh, what was that? I said, well, there's this Vietnamese woman that claims you owe her about 50 years of child support. April Fool. But
that would scare the crap out of me. That would scare the crap out of me. As my youngest daughter lives with me, I still have a child support obligation till I think September of this year, and then I'm free on both my kids. It's over, and I'm going to throw a party at that time. But yeah, listen, I get it. Gil, I want to thank you. It's always good to hear your voice. Thank you for the joke. It was actually a very funny joke. Maybe not as funny as Joe Biden's joke. I think Joe Biden's joke about the bleach going to the hair was a really funny joke. It made me laugh. Laughed twice. The first time I heard it, and then again right now in the air. Gil, Godspeed to you, my man. Always good to hear from you. Now, before we get to the rest of your calls, I want to allow you to listen to this clip from the news.
At about 10:45 last night, that's when about 150 to 200 pro-Israel demonstrators arrived and faced off with the demonstrators inside the pro-Palestine encampment. They tried to remove some of the barricade. We're talking about those wooden boards, those pallets. There were fights. People were using bats. We saw people with some serious head injuries, beaten and bloodied, and they were just going at it. And no police were in sight. There was no one. Now, we understand that campus security, campus police may have arrived, but then they quickly retreated. UCLA then requesting that LAPD come in, but that was after the fact, after the fight. Now, we heard from some students, both Palestinian and Israeli students, telling us they came in peace, but the truth is there was a lot of violence.
Now, I saw the video that accompanied this, and this was a rumble. This was an all-out rumble. She wasn't kidding. People had bats. It was a knockdown, drag-em thing that went on for hours before the cops got involved. And really shocking stuff. If you want to take a look at some of the video of that, I shared some of what I saw on my Instagram story. So if you go and you click the circular picture of me, you'll see the videos that are attached to it. And let me tell you, really eye-opening stuff. And this was, again, not these soy milk drinking college students. These are pros that bring wooden flagpoles to, hang a flag off of, and the flagpole's nothing more than a weapon. And they bring fireworks with them and umbrellas. And they'll throw a pack of firecrackers and Roman candles to blind you as like a flashbang, the way the police would. And they use the umbrellas as shields. Same tactics we've seen from Antifa over the years. Just really professional level agitation. The type of stuff we saw at January 6th. The type of stuff we saw when they burnt down Waukesha, Wisconsin during the George Floyd riots, and so many other big cities. Speaking of Waukesha, Wisconsin, we have some audio from President Trump's visit to Waukesha, Wisconsin, I believe, right? Is that right or no? He's in Michigan. I thought he was there. All right. I'm all over the place. Not enough coffee for me. Anyway, let us go to your calls. I want to go to, who did I leave off on? Let's go to Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Go right ahead.
You really put your finger on it when you mentioned that America was a white Christian nation. That's going to be the central issue of our times, because it's inevitable that we're going to have a financial catastrophe. I mean, you know it, and I've read it on several different places. Everyone sees it coming, but we all admit we don't know what to do about it. When that happens, we're liable to split up. And in 1965, I was alive, and I read about 6 newspapers a day in those days. Every single editorial said that the new immigration law would not affect the racial balance in the United States. It was just going to tidy up some loose ends in the immigration law. Well, since then, in 1965, the U.S., like you said, was 89% white, and I think it was about 10% black. Hispanics were a tiny minority. Now Hispanics are the largest minority in the United States, larger than blacks. And the white people, we were lied to in 1965, and we were lied to by, I think it was Kennedy, it was called the... I forget, but Ted Kennedy was behind it. He lied his brains out, and no one's done anything about it since. That's liable to lead to an awful lot of animosity. I've got so much more to say. Just one more thing. I'm an Irish Catholic. But boy, am I grateful I live in a Protestant country. Think of all the countries where there were dictators. Portugal had Salazar. Spain had Franco. Italy had Mussolini. And Hitler he wasn't a practicing Catholic, but he was a Catholic. And it seems that the Protestant countries are the place where there's the most freedom and the most prosperity.
Interesting. Well, yeah, Frank, I agree with some of what you're saying. I think my view is probably somewhat different from yours in that I don't think the immigration policy is right now. I would say it definitely is, like the last 3 years under Biden, maybe even the last several years. But I wouldn't really go that far back. I believe that the differences are very cultural. And when you look at the racial makeup, there's a few things I think to consider. A, who's having kids? Now, birth rates are also significantly down, predominantly with whites. Right behind them with blacks. And then where they're not down as much is with Hispanics. So I think when you see a rise of Hispanics in the United States, it's not so much because of immigration, but because of the family values aspect, right? It's all about families. It's all about kids. There's a lot of that. That is a tradition, a value that I think many, you and your generation, and my brother's married to a girl who comes from a big Irish Catholic family. That was a big thing. These were big families, not 4 kids. You're talking 6 kids, 5 kids, 7 kids. That's not a thing today. I'm pretty sure you have grandchildren or relatives in your family that today they're having 2 kids, if that. And that's the current numbers. That's what they look like. Hispanics have, I think it's something like 2.5 kids. Asians are at 1.5. Whites are at 1.5 or 1, and or even a lower number than that in the last one I saw from the census. And blacks, despite all of the odds against them, meaning find a Planned Parenthood, it's in a black neighborhood. Despite all of that, they have less kids than Hispanics do, but they still have more kids than blacks than whites. And I think that's a very interesting take when you look at birth rates and when you look at the makeup in society today. So I don't think it's immigration. Now, I will say immigration can destroy a society. I was in Hungary over the last week, and that is the prominent issue for them because they've seen what's happened to Germany. They've seen what's happened to France, and it's not the United States, right? The United States did have a lot of immigration over the years. You just said you're Irish Catholic. There was a time where there weren't Irish in this country, right? Irish came, and they, in many ways, the Irish built the NYPD and many other things. And I get it. Then the Italians, and there's been a lot of immigration in our country, and there's also been a lot of assimilation. And the melting pot idea is one that has worked. What what becomes very problematic, I think, for a society is when you lose touch with your values. I don't think the white part of it is really the part of it that is the glue. I think it's the Christian part of it that really is the glue, in my opinion. And I could be wrong, but that's where I see it. I think when you have a neighborhood and everybody goes to the same church, you can assimilate. When you have a neighborhood, when you don't all go to the same church, I think that's where it becomes a little bit of a challenge. Again, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, and I had no issues with the Jews. But the Jews had issues with the Arabs. And that, since I was a kid, that was a very big deal in Brooklyn. And the same thing with the flags. They were doing that since I was 7 years old. I've been seeing, you'd see Israeli flag, Israeli flag, Israeli flag. Then you'd see a flag from a Middle Eastern country, almost in protest. But it was still a more collegial time where it was tacit disagreement, right? Tacit umbrage that they were taking. It wasn't very overt. They weren't breaking each other's windows. They weren't doing what we're seeing on college campuses today. So ultimately, that's my final thought to you, is that I agree that we have to have things we hold on to. And I think, like Mayor Adams, a black Democrat, like me, Puerto Rican heritage, I think if we rally around the flag, we rally around America, things that we love, God, family, country, we stay together and we stay strong as a nation. The minute that we begin to abandon ship on those values is the minute that we lose so much of what we have. Frank, thank you for the call. Big shout out to WCBC in Maryland. Coming right back, the rest of your calls and more.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The university president took the controversial step of calling in the police to arrest those involved. Now, even if you don't agree with the subjects of their protests, as long as they are peaceful, students should be allowed to protest. It's their First Amendment right. That is the kind of idealism you learn in college. It's one of the few college lessons you can use your whole life.
Now, that is the aforementioned funny man, Stephen Colbert. Now, what's interesting about this is not a joke, right? So I will disagree. When Stephen Colbert puts on his political analyst hat, I'm happy to disagree with him. There's nothing to laugh at. He's a comedian, and I think a good one. But this is something where I think he's just dead wrong. And the reason he's dead wrong here, it's not because of what he's saying. What he's saying is true. This is the idealism you learn in college. And yes, people should be allowed to protest peacefully. Of course, the issue is we just heard the report, 4 minutes ago. And they said they had bats and they were fighting. And these people were fighting for 90 minutes before the cops came. It was a knockdown, drag 'em event at UCLA. Now, the president of Columbia, they had people that were masked that took over an entire wing of a building. You tell me, Hamilton Hall, they called in a SWAT team with like 30 SWAT members in order to take this building back. Stephen Colbert, what are you smoking, sir? There was nothing peaceful about these protests. Columbia University has called off all classes. It's a massive campus in New York City. Nobody's going to school right now. Everybody's going to school online, completely remote. As if we're in the middle of a pandemic. The pandemic here is called Hamas. I don't see how Stephen Colbert can make these statements with a straight face. But again, I get it. He makes a lot of money. He lives an isolated life where, the reality of life when you pay $2.99 a gallon for gas and you make, I don't know what he makes, several $1 million a year, and your gas goes from $2.99 a gallon to, $4.99 a gallon. Let's say you go from a $60 tank to a $90 tank. Do you think that makes a big difference to a guy like Stephen Colbert? No. It doesn't. Same way when he takes his girlfriend or his wife out to dinner and he spends $200 and now he's spending $350. He might go, oh, wow, it seems like more than last time. The $150 at dinner, let's just say they go out on the weekends 4 times a month. Let's say they go out every day, whatever it is. It's the extra 30, 40% increase in life isn't breaking his pocket. He might feel it, but it's not breaking his pocket. That will break the back of most Americans. So Stephen Colbert can make these flippant statements about as long as they're being peaceful, what do you care? Come on. It's easy to do that when you don't know the facts because you don't care to know the facts because you don't realize these people are killing each other. And again, nobody's dying. I'm being a little hyperbolic here to make the case. But yeah, are they hitting each other with bats? Yes. Are they fighting and hurting each other? Yes, that's happening. Are there videos all over the place of kids getting maced in the face because they're fighting with the cops? Yes. Are cops getting injured? Yes. All of the above. Is a SWAT team being called in? Yes. All right. Speed round coming up. I talked too much in this segment. Now they want me to take a break. The coffee's finally kicking in. Folks, don't go anywhere. I'm going to get to your calls momentarily. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. Open Phone America, the speed round. Let's go to Inglewood, Florida, WENG. Kevin, go right ahead.
Hey, we shouldn't deschedule marijuana without heavy regulation. We have come a long way from ditchweed. If you think social media gives kids brain rot, wait until you give them highly concentrated wax.
Yeah. Again, I don't know much about that, but I do know that most doctors I know, they agree that it's not the way to go. Even some doctors that prescribe it say, I keep prescribing it, and they keep coming back because it's not solving their problem with anxiety or with this or with that. So the jury's out. I hear what you're saying. Let's go to Jane, Saratoga, New York, WDGJ. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. You hit the nail on the head again. We have to, these little spoiled brats who are out there, they are controlled by these professional agitators. And people have to keep in mind, the gentleman who spoke earlier with you about freedom and Reagan, that freedom is not free. And every generation needs to fight for it. And those who lose it, who knew it and have lost it, have never known it again. And we have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely, Jane. 100% right. I think what Reagan said was that we're always one generation from seeing the extinction of our liberty. And that's one of the truest things that keeps me going. Anyway, the music means I got to go. But Sue in Shanksville, did I see Ava Vlardingerbroek's speech at CPAC Hungary? I caught a little bit of it, and I saw her as well. She's amazing. She's funny and very, very smart. And maybe we'll bring her on the show if we can track her down with the time difference. It's tough. But thank you for the call, Sue in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, WXDE. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night, and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.